Did you know that the phrase deep state didn't come from the USA? It didn't even come from English. Many people imagine the deep state as a kind of shadowy, secretive boogeyman entity pulling strings in the government, business, and in social movements. But the origins and background of deep state are, well, deeper than you might think. And there's a lot of concrete information we can examine about where this expression came from, how and why it exploded into the mainstream during the first Trump presidency, and why it seems to be such a common theme among conspiracy theorists. So, let's go deep on deep state. The core belief behind the idea of a deep state is that the government isn't just a bunch of elected officials. It's the idea that there are people working invisibly behind the very visible scenes of daily government life, and they're the ones pulling the strings and controlling what happens in our countries and in the world. So, who are these people and what are they out to do? It's important to remember that not all people working with the government are elected officials. Here's a key number: 2.2 million. That number represents roughly the average number of official federal employees in the United States from year to year. But this number doesn't actually represent every single person working on government projects. We'll look at why there's a discrepancy here, and we'll look at the estimates for the true size of government later in this video. But first, let's talk briefly about why the idea of a deep state can be so triggering for people, because these fears aren't unique to any one country, culture, or language, and they can take many forms. At the root is a fear of secret powers. An early but very well-known example of this kind of secret power concern is witch hunts. In the early 1400s, witches were thought of as either mostly harmless or just as local nuisances. But in the 1420s to 30s, a group of churchmen and noblemen put together a theory, stating that witches were actually part of a global conspiracy to take over the world and destroy humankind via satanic rituals and pacts they'd made with the devil. This didn't immediately catch on. But in the late 1400s, a friar named Heinrich Kramer, who had bought into the idea of the conspiracy and was also known as a mentally unstable person, set off on a massive witch hunting expedition. He was a rampant misogynist and had behaviors so erratic, the local bishop kicked him out of the region and released all the supposed witches he had arrested. In retaliation, Kramer used his very vivid and graphic imagination to write a book all about witches and the awful things they do and the ways they were taking over society. The printing press had been invented by this point, and the book exploded in popularity despite its graphic and sexual content. The spread of Kramer's ideas led to mass hysteria and the arrest, persecution, and/or execution of tens of thousands of people, all because of a fear of secret powers. A couple hundred years after these witch hunt conspiracies, we find new examples of secret power concerns. Maybe you've heard of groups like the Freemasons or the Illuminati, secret societies with their own hierarchies, symbols, rituals, and goals. The elevated fear with these secretive groups is the idea that the members are highly influential members of society, and that in these secret meetings, special plans are discussed and carried out that affect the community. In other words, secret leaders are making decisions for the country through their special status and influence. Today, these fears extend to the ultra-wealthy, to former politicians, and even celebrities. So are secret societies like these the deep state people are referring to when they use the phrase? Yes and no. Frustratingly, the answer depends heavily on a person's belief system and the information they have available. There are still people out there who believe a satanic cult of high-status individuals is trying to take over the world and conduct demonic rituals to harvest a chemical called adrenochrome from people's bodies. Seriously, I read some weird stuff to research for this video. Also, adrenochrome doesn't even have medicinal uses, and you can just buy it. There are also people who believe that the deep state refers to secret meetings of high status or wealthy individuals, minus the satanic rituals. What's tricky with this one is that this fear isn't entirely unfounded. Concerns about the influence of financial elites are rooted in actual corruption scandals. That's actually how the expression deep state even came to be a term in the 1990s. It originated in Turkey as the phrase derin devlet, literally deep state, from the idea that there were shadowy military, intelligence, and business interests influencing the government. This fear of shadowy governmental figures grew in the US from around the 1960s, when concerns about international espionage grew. A book called The Invisible Government, which detailed real covert actions taken by the CIA, stoked fears and increased awareness about secretive operations within the USA and overseas. For the first time, US citizens got a look into the shady actions taken by their own government, which led to unease and distrust. It stoked the flames of conspiracy theorists as well, and the instability this introduced was taken advantage of by the Soviets, who pushed these narratives and propaganda in an effort to sow further division between the citizens and the government. And this was not the first or last time fears of the deep state and secretive power structures were used as political maneuvering tools. The Night of the Long Knives is a particularly infamous one in which Hitler had political opponents and critics executed or arrested, ostensibly out of a desire to prevent a coup. In reality, it was a move to consolidate power. Calls to oust the deep state are a bit like contemporary witch hunts, in that the targets for these calls are often ill-defined and open to interpretation. So we can see that the idea of a deep state can be a politically useful tool for those who want to gain power, because it's a scary concept for a lot of people. The idea of a secret power structure operating behind the scenes is unsettling, and knowing that corruption exists, espionage happens, and dictatorships are real all add fuel to the conspiratorial fire. We saw the phrase deep state start gaining some traction near the end of Obama's term as president, because people believed he was part of an elite cult, and the phrase exploded during Trump's first term because he himself was using it a ton to talk about needing to eradicate the deep state in the United States. So what does it mean in this sense? Remember that figure I mentioned near the beginning, 2.2 million, the rough average of federal workers employed in the US? I said that number isn't representative of the true size of government. And it's because while the government directly employs those 2.2 million people, there are also millions more that are employed not directly, but through government contracts, the military, and nonprofit organizations. These employees make things like military equipment and provide services, and the organizations with these government relationships provide funding for politicians to help them get elected, and that funding incentivizes them to stay elected. The Brookings Institute estimates that when Obama took office, the true size of the government was close to about 10 million people. It went up to about 11.3 million during his term, and then back down to about 9 million by the time he left office. In Trump's first term, the number shot up again to around 11 million. Some argue that federal employees and government contractors are the real deep state in the sense that this is what's making the country run. It's not a secretive, satanic group, it's a complex web of relationships that has existed for decades between the private sector and the government. This kind of thing is what Elon Musk and his Doge team were ostensibly tasked with fixing. But because these relationships have been in place for so long, and contractors have worked for decades to gain advantages by influencing federal rules and regulations through backing certain elected officials, making quick changes to the structure would be very hard, to say the least. So if the contractor part of the deep state is hard to change, what else is there to stamp out or eradicate? There are those 2.2 million official federal employees, after all. They're not elected, but they're hired for certain expertise, and their jobs historically haven't been affected by who is president of the country. They're in their positions to perform a specific job, like understanding weather patterns, tracking economic data, working in the post office, and conducting research. You know, experts. We love them. In the past, their positions could not be legally affected by their political alignment. But in the second Trump presidency, legislation has been introduced that could reclassify these types of experts, remove them from their positions, and replace them with someone selected by the president. This presents a problem because it's important to have true experts in expert positions, not people chosen because of political loyalty. So hopefully now you can see that deep state means very different things depending on who you're talking to. I aim to present this video without going too much into the multitude of deep state conspiracy theories, but my hope is that the next time you see deep state used, you'll be able to think back to this video, consider the source, and get to the bottom of what that person really means when they use the phrase. I hope you enjoyed learning about this complex topic. If you did, give the video a like because it really does help the channel. See you next time.